People used to say Madame Zainab's restaurant was the quietest place in the whole town. The tables were clean, the pots were shiny, and the food was hot, yet no one came. Each morning, she sat on a wooden bench and watched others pass by, heading to louder places with smoke rising and laughter spilling out. Her heart felt heavy, like a stone tied inside her chest. She wondered why hunger never led people to her door. I am telling this story as it was told to me, slowly and carefully, because it carries a warning. Madame Zainab was not a bad woman at first. She greeted everyone with a smile and prayed before cooking. But hunger can change a person's thinking. When coins stop dropping into the bowl, the mind starts listening to dangerous ideas. One evening, as she closed her shop, she heard two old women talking behind the building. They spoke in low voices about food that pulls people like a rope. One woman said, in the old days, they used water that has touched death. Madame Zainab froze. Her ears burned as she listened. They laughed and walked away, leaving those words hanging in the air. That night, she did not sleep. The words followed her like shadows. She kept asking herself if survival had its own rules. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. The next morning, Madame Zainab went to the market, but her eyes were not on the food stalls. They were searching for answers. Everywhere she turned, she remembered the whisper about water that touched death. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was foolish talk meant to scare children. Still, the thought sat in her head like an itch she could not scratch. Her restaurant stayed empty all day. Even flies seemed bored of the place. Amina, the young girl who helped her wash plates, asked softly, "Madam, should we close early today?" Madame Zainab nodded, unable to speak. Shame filled her chest. She paid Amina and sent her home before sunset. As darkness came, Madame Zainab walked toward the river path without knowing why. Her feet moved on their own. The river was known for many things. It gave fish, it took lives, and it kept secrets. Long ago, people washed the dead there before burial when there was no other place. Elders said the water remembered everything. She hid behind a tree and watched two men wash a wrapped body near the bank. Her stomach turned, but her eyes stayed open. When they left, silence returned. The river flowed calmly, as if nothing had happened. Madame Zainab stepped closer. Her hands shook. She told herself she was only looking. But deep inside, something else was waking up. The moon was bright when Madame Zainab filled a small container with river water. Her hands felt cold, even though the night was warm. She whispered a prayer without knowing who she was praying to. The river made no sound of protest. It only flowed, slow and patient. She rushed home and hid the container behind her kitchen shelf. All night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her heart beat fast, then slow, then fast again. By morning, fear mixed with hope inside her. She told herself this was the last step, just an experiment, nothing more. When she cooked the soup that day, she added only a little of the water. Her hand paused before pouring it in. She remembered her late mother's voice warning her about shortcuts. Still, the pot was already boiling. She closed her eyes and poured. The smell changed. It was richer, heavier. Madame Zainab stepped back, surprised. When customers came, they did not greet her. They went straight to the pots, hungry like children who had not eaten in days. By noon, the food was gone. Coins filled her bowl. People smiled with full mouths and asked for more. Some even licked their fingers. Madame Zainab laughed, but her laugh sounded strange to her own ears. That night, she dreamed of hands reaching out of water, calling her name. By the third day, Madame Zainab's restaurant was full. People stood outside waiting, angry when food finished. They said her cooking felt warm inside their bones. Some claimed it healed old pains. Others said they dreamed of rivers and shadows after eating, but still returned. Amina noticed the change first. She said the soup smelled like wet soil. She said her sleep felt heavy, like someone pressing on her chest. Madame Zainab told her to stop talking nonsense. Money was finally flowing, and she refused to question it. Each night, Madame Zainab returned to the river. She went later and later, hiding her face. She washed her containers where the dead were washed. The river began to feel closer to her, like it was watching. Beya, the fisherman, saw her one night. He knew the river well and felt something was wrong. He followed quietly but said nothing. In town, people began fighting when food ran out. Their eyes looked dull, their voices sharp. Madame Zainab started feeling pain in her joints. Her skin itched. She scratched until marks appeared. Still, she cooked. Still, she poured the water. She told herself she was only borrowing luck. But the river never lends without asking for payment. Malam Sadiq, the old man who knew the town's stories, came to the restaurant one afternoon. He did not eat. He only watched. His eyes were heavy with knowledge. He told Madame Zainab that water used for the dead binds the living to restless spirits. He warned her to stop. She laughed in his face. She said hunger taught her better lessons than fear. The old man left quietly, shaking his head. That night, Madame Zainab woke up screaming. She saw a woman made of water standing by her bed. The woman's voice was calm but cold. She said the river had given, and now it would take. Madame Zainab begged for time. The woman vanished. By morning, one customer collapsed in the street. Then another. Still, people lined up to eat. Beya went to the police. Amina cried as she washed plates that smelled like death. Madame Zainab looked at her reflection and saw dark patches spreading on her skin. She knew then that something had gone too far. But stopping felt impossible. The river had tasted her life, and it was hungry for more. The next day, the town felt different. People walked faster, like they were chasing something they could not see. By morning, Madame Zainab's restaurant was already crowded. Some customers knocked on the door before she even opened. Their faces looked tired, but their eyes burned with hunger. When the pots came out, they pushed and argued like children fighting over sweets. I tell you this part slowly, because this was when fear started growing teeth. A man finished his food and began shaking. His hands trembled, yet he smiled and asked for more. When Madame Zainab said the pot was empty, his smile fell, and anger filled his face. He banged the table until others pulled him away. Amina felt weak while serving. Her head hurt, and her dreams had become strange. She dreamed of a river full of voices, all whispering at once. She told Madame Zainab she wanted to stop eating the food. Madame Zainab shouted at her, saying fear was stealing her strength. That night, Madame Zainab returned to the river. The water felt thicker, darker. As she bent down, she thought she heard her name spoken clearly. She looked around, but no one was there. Still, the sound stayed in her ears. She filled her container again, her heart beating fast. She did not notice the shadow that rose behind her and sank back into the water when she turned around. Beya could not shake what he had seen. The river had always spoken to him in soft ways, through fish and waves. But now it felt angry. He watched Madame Zainab closely, counting how many nights she came to the river. Each time, she stayed longer. People began to fall sick after eating, but they refused to stop. They said the food called them. One woman cried as she ate, saying she knew it was wrong, yet her hands kept moving. The town whispered, but no one acted. Malam Sadiq gathered a few elders and warned them. He said corpse water opens doors that never close fully. The elders argued. Some said business success should not be questioned. Others said the town was cursed. Madame Zainab's body started changing. Her joints swelled. Dark lines crept across her arms like spilled ink. She wrapped herself in long clothes and avoided mirrors. At night, she heard footsteps inside her room when she was alone. The river woman returned in her dreams. This time, she smiled. She said payment was near. Madame Zainab woke up crying, her bed soaked with sweat. Still, by morning, she cooked again. Desperation had become her shield. She believed money could protect her from anything. The first death came quietly. A man who ate at the restaurant every day did not wake up one morning. His family cried, but some still went to eat later that same day. They said hunger was stronger than fear. Inspector Kola arrived in town after the second death. He listened and watched. He noticed how people thought when food finished. He noticed how Madame Zainab avoided his eyes. Still, there was no proof, only fear and rumors. Amina could no longer stay silent. She followed Madame Zainab one night and saw her at the river. She saw where the water was taken from. Her legs shook, but her mind became clear. She ran to Beya and told him everything. That same night, Madame Zainab felt pain like fire under her skin. When she scratched, flakes fell like dry leaves. She cried and begged the river for mercy. The water stayed silent. The river woman appeared again, closer than before. She said the debt had grown. She said the river wanted a life from the hands that cooked. Madame Zainab screamed and promised anything. The river listened. Storm clouds gathered the next evening, even though it was not the season for rain. Wind pushed through the town, knocking over stalls and doors. People ran for shelter, but Madame Zainab stood in her kitchen, cooking as if nothing had changed. Beya and Amina went to Inspector Kola. They spoke fast, fear shaking their voices. Beya described the river. Amina described the smell, the dreams, the sickness. The inspector listened carefully. His face hardened. When he arrived at the restaurant, lightning flashed. He ordered the pots opened. The smell that rose made people step back. It was heavy and wrong. Madame Zainab fell to her knees, crying. Outside, the river began to swell. Water rushed through the streets, heading straight for the restaurant. People screamed and ran. The river woman rose from the flood, tall and shining, her voice loud as thunder. She called Madame Zainab by name. She said the debt must be paid. Madame Zainab confessed everything, her words breaking apart like wet paper. The river entered the restaurant and washed it clean, carrying away pots, tables, and secrets. When the flood pulled back, Madame Zainab lay still. Her body looked old and empty, like something the river had finished using. The town stood silent, watching. Inspector Kola ordered the place closed. No one argued. In the days that followed, people slowly returned to their senses. The hunger faded. The anger left their eyes. Malam Sadiq led prayers by the river, asking it to rest. Beyo returned to fishing, though he never went out at night again. Amina left the town to start fresh. She carried the story with her as a warning, not as fear. Children were told never to eat where greed cooks the food. The restaurant was never rebuilt. Grass grew where it once stood. When the wind passed, some said they could still smell soup, faint and sad. This is how the story was told to me. Not to scare, but to teach. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to the danger of shortcuts and greedy hunger. If you were the protagonist, what would you do? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. If you want, I can. Understood. We continue cleanly from Chapter 10, expanding the consequences and deepening the mystery. No ending lesson yet, that will come only in Chapter 25 as you instructed. Even after Madame Zainab's body was taken away, the town did not return to normal. People woke up tired, as if sleep no longer rested them. Some still dreamed of rivers. Others heard their names whispered when they were alone. The hunger was gone, but fear remained, sitting quietly in every house. Inspector Kola stayed in town longer than planned. He sealed the restaurant ruins, but strange things kept happening. At night, the ground near the old kitchen stayed wet, even when there was no rain. Dogs refused to go near it. Children pointed at the place and cried for no reason. I was told that Amina delayed her journey because she felt the story was not finished. She said evil never leaves without leaving marks. She helped Malam Sadiq clean the riverbank where bodies had once been washed. Old clothes and broken bowls were buried far away. One morning, a woman claimed she saw Madame Zainab standing by the river, washing her hands. When others ran there, nothing was found. Inspector Kola wrote it down but said nothing. Beya noticed fewer fish in his nets. The river felt quiet, too quiet. Malam Sadiq warned that when spirits are forced away, they do not always go peacefully. The town waited, holding its breath, not knowing what the river still wanted. Days passed, and the sickness returned, but this time, it touched only those who had eaten the food the most. Their skin itched. Their mouths tasted bitter. Doctors found no cause. Fear spread again, softer but deeper. Malam Sadiq gathered the elders and told them the truth. He said the river had been used wrongly for many years, not only by Madame Zainab. He said the spirits were angry with the whole town, not just one woman. Inspector Kola allowed a cleansing ceremony, though he did not fully believe. Sometimes, even men of law listen when fear has no answer. Drums were beaten softly. Prayers were spoken clearly. Food was shared freely, without payment. That night, the river rose again, but gently this time. No houses were touched. The water only washed the bank clean. People said they saw shadows lift from the surface and disappear into the sky. Amina felt lighter. Beya caught fish again the next morning. The sick slowly healed. Still, one thing remained. The place where the restaurant once stood never dried. Grass refused to grow there, as if the land remembered everything, and memory, like water, never truly disappears. Inspector Kola prepared to leave the town, but before he did, a child came running to him. The boy said voices were coming from the old restaurant ground. The inspector followed, careful and quiet. At the spot, the air felt cold. The earth was soft, like it had just been dug. Kola ordered the ground opened. Beneath it, they found broken pots, stained dark, buried in a hurry. Malam Sadiq bowed his head. He said burying evil does not end it. The items were taken far away and burned. Smoke rose straight into the sky. That night, for the first time in weeks, the town slept peacefully. Amina left at dawn. She hugged Beya and thanked Malam Sadiq. She said stories must travel so warnings can move faster than mistakes. As she walked away, she did not look back. I was told that children born after those days never felt drawn to the river at night. They played freely in the sun. The town slowly healed, learning to cook with patience instead of fear. But elders still say that whenever greed listens too closely, the river leans in to listen to. Years later, travelers passed through the town and asked why no restaurant stood near the river. People told them this story, not loudly, not proudly, but carefully. Some travelers laughed. Others listened closely. One man tried to open a food stall near the old spot. His pots cracked for no reason. His fire refused to burn well. He left after 3 days without profit. The land had made its decision. Beya grew old and taught young fishermen to respect the water. Malam Sadiq passed away peacefully, leaving behind warnings and wisdom. Inspector Kola rose in rank but never forgot this case. As for Madam Zainab, no grave carried her name. Some say the river kept her. Others say her story became her punishment. This is how tales live, not as lies, but as lessons shaped by fear and truth. And this story was not yet finished, because stories only end when people stop repeating them. That is why I am telling you now. Because somewhere, someone may be standing at the edge of a bad decision, listening to a whisper that sounds like help. The river teaches us this: what you use wrongly will use you back. Hunger is real, but so is consequence. Shortcuts feel soft at first, then they harden around the heart. The town survived because it faced the truth together. Madam Zainab fell because she carried the secret alone. And every time food is cooked, intention enters the pot before the spoon does. Remember that. We go old chapters 16 to 20, continuing smoothly, deepening the unease, and keeping everything simple, clear, and suspenseful. No final lesson yet. That will come only in chapter 25, exactly as you asked. After Amina left, the town felt quieter, but not safer. Silence can sometimes be louder than noise. People avoided the river at night, yet they still glanced at it when passing by, like someone watching a sleeping snake. One evening, a young boy went missing. He was last seen chasing a ball near the river path. Panic spread quickly. Mothers screamed his name. Men searched with lanterns. Beya joined them, his heart beating hard. They found the boy sitting near the water, staring into it. He did not cry. He did not speak. When his mother hugged him, his body was cold. Later, he said the river told him stories. Stories about food, hunger, and a woman who would not stop cooking. Malam Sadiq's words returned to everyone's mind. Spirits that are fed do not forget the taste. Inspector Kola delayed his departure again. He ordered guards to stay near the river at night. Still, shadows moved where no one stood. That night, Beya dreamed of nets filled with bones instead of fish. He woke up shaking. The town began to understand that even though Madam Zainab was gone, the door she opened had not fully closed. The guards posted by the river refused to stay after 3 nights. They said the water spoke their names. One man claimed a wet hand touched his leg while he stood on dry ground. Inspector Kola did not argue with them. Malam Sadiq said something had to be returned to the river to balance what was taken. Not a life, but truth. He asked for everything connected to the restaurant to be brought out. People searched their homes. They brought spoons, plates, bowls, and even coins they had saved from eating there. A pile grew by the riverbank. Some cried as they dropped items, remembering how they had fought for food. Amina was sent a message to return, but she refused. She said some journeys must stay one way. As the sun set, Malam Sadiq spoke to the river. He did not shout. He did not beg. He spoke like someone speaking to an old friend who had been hurt. The water moved gently. The pile of items slowly sank beneath the surface without a splash. That night, no one dreamed of the river. For a while, peace returned. Children laughed again. Fish filled Beya's nets. The guards slept without fear. People believed the matter was over. Then, a traveler arrived. He said he tasted food like no other in a nearby town down the road. Food that made people forget pain and hunger. Food cooked by a woman who learned a secret from a river. Fear spread faster than fire. Inspector Kola rode out with Beya and 2 others. When they reached the town, they saw a small restaurant by a stream. The woman cooking smiled too much. The smell from her pot felt heavy in the air. Malam Sadiq was right. Stories travel. So do mistakes. The inspector shut the place down at once. The woman screamed and said she was only doing what she was taught. When asked who taught her, she pointed toward the water. The river's hunger had learned to walk. The second town held a cleansing quickly, learning from the first town's pain. The woman was taken away. The stream was blocked. Food stalls were closed for days. Inspector Kola understood then that this was no single story. It was a warning moving from place to place, looking for ears that would listen. When he returned home, he wrote everything down. He said some stories must be carried by paper so they cannot be forgotten. Beya stood by the river one last time before the inspector left for good. The water flowed calmly. For the first time, it felt full, not hungry. Malam Sadiq smiled and said balance had been restored, but only for now. He reminded them that greed always tries again, wearing a new face. The town agreed to protect the river and never use it wrongly again. Still, elders say the water remembers every hand that touches it. Years passed. Children grew. New people came and left. The town remained careful. No restaurant was ever built near the river again. Sometimes, when the moon is full, the water reflects faces that are not there. People look away and hold their children closer. The story stayed alive, moving from mouth to mouth. Growing roots in memory. Because stories do not die, they wait. Inspector Kola returned one final time to the river town, not as an officer, but as a witness. He wanted to see with his own eyes that the land had healed. The river flowed gently, no longer swollen with anger. Birds rested near the bank again. Still, he felt a quiet weight in his chest. He met Beya at sunrise. Beya said the river now gave only what was taken with respect. Fish came slowly, but honestly. People no longer rushed or fought. Hunger was answered with patience. That morning, a group of children asked Beya to tell them the story of the broken restaurant. He hesitated, then spoke. He did not make it scary. He made it truthful. He said greed is louder than wisdom when people are afraid. Inspector Kola listened from a distance and realized the story no longer belonged to the law. It belonged to memory. Before leaving, he placed a stone near the river bank, not as a mark of fear, but as a reminder. He said some lessons must be seen, not written. As he walked away, the river reflected the sky clearly. For the first time since the trouble began, nothing stirred beneath the surface. In another season, the land grew stronger. New farms opened. Shared cooking returned to homes. People began trusting food again, but they never forgot how trust can be broken. One evening, Beya noticed a young woman standing by the river, staring into it. His heart tightened. He approached calmly and asked why she stood there. She said she had heard stories of water that brings success. Beya sat beside her and told her everything. He did not shout. He did not scare her. He told her how hunger can lie and how shortcuts carry hidden prices. The woman listened, then thanked him and walked away from the river. That night, Beya slept well. Stories had begun to do their work, time passed, and the river town became known not for fear, but for wisdom. Travelers came to hear the tale. Some laughed. Some listened. Those who listened stayed longer. The land where Madame Zainab's restaurant once stood slowly softened. Grass did not grow, but flowers appeared one by one. People said the earth was forgiving, but not forgetting. No one ever spoke Madame Zainab's name with anger, only with sadness. They remembered her as a woman who was hungry before she was cruel. And that is how the story stayed human. I was told this story by someone older than me, who said it was passed down not to judge, but to guide. Because many people stand where Madame Zainab once stood, tired, afraid, and tempted. The river did not choose her. She chose the river. And choice, once made, always answers back. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to the danger of taking shortcuts when life becomes hard. Hunger can push people to places they never planned to go, but wisdom is knowing when to stop and turn back. If you were the protagonist, what would you do when survival whispers and conscience speaks softly? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. And that is why this story was told.